On August 31st, 1888, a woman was found dead, brutally murdered in the Whitechapel district of London. The body was still warm, but there was no trace of the killer. Word spread that there was a murderer on the loose, leading to a rise of fear throughout London. Who was behind the strange death? And who would be next? I'm Jaden Ross, and this is the story of Jack the Ripper. Charles Cross, a cart driver, turned into Bucks Row on his way to the morning routine on August 31st, 1888 at around 3:40 in the morning. As he reached the end of the route, he noticed a small body in front of the gateway of Brown's stable yard. It was not uncommon for drunks to be found asleep here, but to make sure he checked the body in the pitch-black night. Upon further inspection, with the aid of another cart driver, Robert Paul, who had noticed him, they believed she could possibly be unconscious, but most likely dead, not noticing the slashes on her throat and abdomen. After calling for the police for assistance, both cart drivers left, claiming to be innocent. Officer Thane, one of the three officers to arrive at the scene, left to go get a surgeon to the scene and arrived with Dr. Henry Llewellyn around 4 in the morning. After further inspection from the doctor, it was estimated that she had been murdered roughly 30 minutes before his arrival, with one slash to the throat. Blood loss is lowered once a person is dead, which led the doctor to guessing that by the lack of blood, all of the abdominal wounds were created after her death, taking no more than 5 minutes to perform. Police were sent to look for the murderer or clues on his location, while the body was taken to a mortuary to be inspected in detail. The next day, she was classified as Mary Ann Nichols, dead at age 43. Mary had divorced from her husband, William Nichols, on January 16, 1864 due to her being an alcoholic, according to police records, leaving him with their 5 children. She took up prostitution to make money and lived mostly in workhouses and boarding houses. During her later years, she managed to share a room in a common lodging house with a woman named Emily Holland. Holland last saw Nichols at 2:30 in the morning, August 31st, where she was trying to get enough money to pay for her bed for the night, although claiming to have already earned the money 3 times that night, but spent it on alcohol rather than her room. At 6 in the morning, September 8, 1888, just a little more than a week after the murder of Mary Nichols, the corpse of Annie Chapman was found near the doorway inside the backyard of 29th Hanbury Street, even more mutilated than Nichols. But the murder was still very similar to the death of Nichols. She had a slash going from left to right on her throat just as Nichols had, and several abdominal wounds. She had also divorced due to drinking issues and was a prostitute as well. But there were still details that didn't match, including no bruising on the face like Nichols had, and organs strewn about over her shoulders, with some removed, although there was no evidence that it was the murderer, as some believed it was the mortuary who sold them. Her tongue was also swollen, and she had a handkerchief tied around her neck before she was stabbed, leading some to believe that it was the cause of her death, or it was used to make her put up less of a fight. Due to an apron of one of the residents living in the building being near the corpse, and religious discrimination of the time, many people thought that the murderer was a local Jewish leather worker, John Pizer, also known as Leather Apron. This is where the Ripper got its original name, Leather Apron. After a false arrest, Pizer went to court and was found innocent, receiving a monetary compensation for some of the newspapers companies who published articles stating him as Leather Apron, and renamed the murder to Jack the Ripper after that point. September 30th, a cart driver named Louise Diemschutz found the body of Elizabeth Stride in Dutefield's yard at 1 in the morning. Once again, there was no sign of the killer, although afterwards Diemschutz claimed that the blood was still flowing from her slit throat, and he believed that the murderer was still in the same yard at the time of her discovery, but was unable to see and was barely able to see the corpse, even after lighting a match. There were many claims of sighting her, with men before her death, and even a woman fitting her description being attacked at around 12:45 near where she was found dead. The closest sighting to her discovery of her death described her trying to get away from a stout man barely taller than her, which was at the same time and location of the sighting of who was supposedly her being attacked. The only wound she possessed was her slit throat. At 1:45 later that day, the body of Catherine Eddowes was found brutally mutilated, with intestines drawn across her body and her kidney removed. No one has proof of a recent sighting of her before her death, other than a police report of her being turned in for public drunkenness. The corpse of Catherine Eddowes is rather graphic, so November 9th, the worst first of the 5 murdered women was found in her residence to the point of beyond recognition. This woman was Mary Jane Kelly. She was last seen with a stout ginger-haired man with a bowler hat carrying a keg of beer at her place of residence. At 4 in the morning, both Elizabeth Prater and Sarah Lewis heard a cry of murder coming from the direction of her residence, but claimed that it wasn't uncommon to hear those cries, leading them to going back to sleep. Her body was found by her landlord's assistant coming to collect her rent, which was 6 weeks late. Her body was described as 2 small piles of flesh sitting on her bedside table, with 1 larger pile on her bed. Several parts of her abdomen were found resting between her legs. Even though there was little to no description on the order of attacks or details, many still believe that this is the work of Jack the Ripper, or more realistically, the other murders were most likely interrupted, while this one was hidden in the protection of her room, leading him to showing how far he was willing to go. The picture you are about to see is very graphic. I advise not looking if you wish to not see the horrid corpse of Mary Jane Kelly. There are many similarities leading to the possible connection of one murderer. The facts known are that all 5 women were prostitutes. 2 were divorced, 2 were widowed, and 1's longtime boyfriend died shortly before they were going to get married. Each of these women, except Catherine, were described as last seen with a man of similar height, stature, clothing, and facial hair before their murders. All of the murders, except Kelly's, which was not able to be described due to how mutilated her body was, were initiated by a slash to the throat, going left to right with a blade of similar length and design. With this information, it is commonly believed that there was only one murderer, and I would have to agree. There were several suspects who were accused, but none of them matched the common description of the man seen with almost all of the women. I believe that the man behind the murder is unnamed, and unfortunately would remain unnamed. The unfortunate death of these 5 women were tragic and horrid. The brutal deaths that have yet to be solved and that sent London into a terror will most likely remain unsolved forever. But stories of the infamous Jack the Ripper will remain to be told for generations. In 1888, tragedy struck in London. The tragedy that is the story of Jack.